into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, no, no. Not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
All right. You are under arrest for listening to having really good podcast taste. And it's
sexy.
A charge in the first degree.
That's probably a crime if in some places. If we're ever to get like super popular and like actually affect people's significantly affect people's political practice, it would be illegal to listen to us.
Yeah.
Right. And that reminds me of another crime. Identity theft, which is wrong.
That's right.
Why are you thinking about that, Alex?
If any of you listening has stolen podcaster Anders Lee identity and convinced him to turn thousands of dollars into Target gift cards, immediately stop what you are doing and return his money. It is not funny to steal from Anders Lee.
They said I was being investigated, so I was told the FBI had been monitoring me for
yeah, do the
weeks.
whole story here.
Yeah, what happened?
It has so many twists and turns.
Okay, so I received a call yesterday from an Officer Eric, and I was like, "This is Officer Eric." I was like, he didn't sound like an Eric, by the way. I'm not gonna,
Did he ask you to?
Strong Indian accent coming out of Eric.
Yeah. But people change their names for like customer service stuff all the time to deal with Americans. So I figured that was like, oh, maybe he said he was from the Federal Reserve in the law enforcement department. So it was like, oh, he must have just changed his name even with that,
I'm a cop from the government. And I'm calling you because you are under arrest.
Yes, there's a warrant. There were 4 charges against me for money laundering and drug smuggling. There were millions of dollars, supposedly.
Me and Jake, in the middle of the day yesterday, Andrew just sent us a text message that's like, I'm wanted for trafficking millions of dollars to Colombia. And we were like, what?
I didn't know it. I thought I used to work at a Colombian restaurant, and one of the managers, who was not Colombian, but was sketchy, would have had access to my social security number. So he could have set up bank accounts in my name and done this. I was very skeptical still. I was like, how do I know this is real? Blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, well, here's how you know it's real. Tell us the last 3 digits of your social security number. See how I didn't ask for your whole social security number? I was like, that is legit.
Point, Eric.
Yeah, and now that I think about it, he just wanted, it could have been any 3 numbers, and he'd be like, oh, yes, that checks out. I'm a fucking dupe. But the thing that got me, and I would not have fallen for this, I swear, is if it wasn't for this, they were like, we want to talk to your local police officer, like someone for your local sheriff's department. I live in DC. I was like, there's no sheriff here, but he was like, well, call the local police department. And by the way, I've never called police department before, but they were like, we're going to get someone from the police department on the horn with you and me. We're going to talk this out and work this out. So it was like, okay. And I gave him the phone number for the local police department, and then a call came from that number. So after that, I was like, okay, this must be real.
Oh, that's legit.
Long story short, I wound up buying 10 Target gift cards and scratching them off and sending pictures of them to a random phone number. And now I am in the hole.
The police, they rarely want you to do that, but when they do, it's because you've trafficked millions of dollars to Colombia.
Yeah. Well, the explanation was that my bank account was going to be frozen. All supposedly 12 bank accounts associated with me. I only have 1, but they said they were all going to be frozen. So you got to get your money out before it gets frozen, or else you won't be able to use it for a few months or something. So I was like, okay.
It's
That
so
sounds-
funny you'd be on the phone with like an actual policeman who would not actually come see you and just
there's COVID.
dial it in like, go to Target.
There's COVID going on.
True.
Wait, so you texted us in the middle of that? I feel like I could have stopped you, man.
Yeah.
I know. I feel actually kind of guilty about this entire thing because
It
it
was
was
your
a
fault,
wild
yes.
ride.
This is a hate crime. Again, I don't like. Again, to you play the autism card, but this is a hate crime against autistic people.
9 out of 10 autistic people are pranked by financial scammers telling you to go to Target.
I mean, this is an actual thing where I can plausibly say I am very low social IQ.
You should do whatever you got to do to get them to give you that money, or to give someone to give
All
you
right,
that
I'll
money.
tell my bank.
Somebody owes Andrews money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't
I mean-
give it to him directly. He should maybe have a caretaker who holds that money.
Oh,
We can
no.
get Naomi to have the money.
I'm going to apply for
Fuck.
conservatorship over
Yeah,
Anders.
It is a Britney situation.
Anders is the new Britney.
The funniest part of this whole thing is that while we were about to record, someone else called. Another one of these guys called, and then we didn't record it. I wish I had pressed record. I just was getting stuff set up.
This is after I'd figured out it was a scam, by the way.
Yeah, and it's a guy doing, or he's not doing, he's got a Middle Eastern accent, and he's like,
He's not doing offensive Indian voice. That is just his voice.
and he's saying, my name's Brian, and then Anders was going like, Brian, what kind of name is that? Like, where are you from?
Under there were specific circumstances here. I don't like to do the way.
Well, he also doubled down on it too. He said, "My name is Brian Miller from Houston, Texas." It was like, okay, well, I know you're not Brian.
Yeah, I
Miller.
had
No
Jake
way.
right here, who's from Houston. So it's like, oh, what part of Houston?
Yeah, I know, I could have verified.
Yeah.
And then he went, what part of Houston are you from? And then the guy just
Long
went,
pause.
a long pause, and then, I am in bed with your wife.
Owned.
Yeah.
Stolen from and then owned. Live on podcast.
I still think that's something like a tough-talking Federal Reserve law enforcement agent might say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The police who work at the Federal Reserve in Houston, Texas.
God damn, dude. This is so
Oh,
crazy.
The fact he got a zinger in at the end. Oh.
The reason I got so deep into this is, one, maybe autism. Two, I'm extremely not racist. So I
It's
didn't
true.
make any assumptions based on that.
That's what
Had
they're-
it been white people, then maybe I would have been wise to it. But I'm
Right.
overcompensating.
And
Yeah.
no people of any race should be scamming Andrews. He has done nothing wrong to deserve such a
Truly.
thing. And I'm Alex. Welcome to the show.
Yeah. Right. Forgot to. You know who we are. Welcome to the show. Well, I mean, that's horrible. That's about as horrible as you might expect someone to do if they were a police officer in a stupid police officer gang.
Gang-related activities.
Check out that
Tricking
segue.
autists. Making them go to Target for thousands of dollars.
We're going to be talking about something today that you might have heard about in the news in the last year or so. There have been a couple of exposés on it, which is that the police are also in gangs within the police department, so they're police and they're also in just a gang. It's really
Operation
weird.
Hat on a Hat.
Yeah. No one knows why you would be both be a cop, which is a gang, and then also in a gang, which is a gang on top of that, because you just can't get enough camaraderie
Can't get enough.
or whatever.
It's got to be like a lifestyle thing. Like being a cop, like even if you're really into it, is kind of dorky. But if you're in a cool gang called the Boppers,
Yeah.
everybody's got to respect you now.
Oh, and they are cool, as we'll get into in the show. We'll discover they're very. Some people would find this very cool. Not me personally, but some people who are.
If you buy shirts on Facebook, you think this is the coolest thing.
Yeah. And then, but also, so I mean, I was reading about this, and like, what's interesting is when like a police sergeant or whatever has to defend, his subordinate officer getting into some sort of shooting, and then the people go, the guy who shot me had a tattoo. I know he's in one of those police gangs. Their explanation of it is, Oh, these aren't bad gangs. This is like a thing that our officers do for like camaraderie. Like it's like a team building thing. It makes them better at work because the job is hard or whatever. Which is
It's the same as the Second Amendment people. It's like, you can't stop a gang until you form a good gang. We need gangs in our schools to fight the gangs.
Yeah. It's insane. It's just like their justification of their police gangs is just, if you can't believe that that's good, and then the gangs you're fighting that are gangs are bad, though that does camaraderie too, right? What does a gang do?
They're investigating. Sometimes people investigate things. People investigate crimes. Sometimes people want to see what it's like so they can tell others and disseminate information, like journalists, and they fall victim to crimes. And maybe that's what they're going for. They want to get in a gang fight so they know what that's like, just like someone might just, get duped by a financial fraudster just
Anders,
to be able to.
We got to get you in a gang.
Have that lived
This never
experience.
would have happened.
We got to get you in a gang, dude.
I guess so.
We gotta
Yeah.
Can you dance?
Yes, I can dance. Can't learn
Okay.
choreography, but I took tap dancing actually.
Oh, okay. Well, that's probably not the same kind of dance, but we'll see.
We gotta
We'll
get
get you
you
in somewhere.
You'll be like the guy in the Crips that does their computers or something.
I don't know if you want me doing that either.
Yeah, you should not.
No, I guess
if
not.
you're gonna like Anders in your gang, you need a different position for him than that.
Yeah, no. Okay, you'll teach people like stage acting or something. I don't know. Something that
Anders
doesn't
is
help.
calling Naomi into his gang.
I can coach people before they testify.
I'm not sure about that one either.
Yeah, something. I don't know. We gotta workshop
let's
it.
see. Okay, we'll figure
If
it
the
out.
gang needs a podcast,
Yeah, I could test the kratom.
yeah. Well, you like take a swoop with your finger and then put it in your mouth.
Yeah. Also, by now, my digestive system can probably handle anything, so I can be the poison tester.
Yeah, for
and tell
the head
kingpin.
gang guy.
Yeah.
Do you need someone in your gang to take huge shits?
I'm here to test poison for the king of the gang. Can anyone point me in the direction of the king of the Crips?
My liege! The kratom's been tainted.
Your Honor.
I'm now enjoying a king who's hooked on kratom. Very cool.
King Kratom.
Tobacco. They sell it at Tobacco King, so
The king of
connection.
having a good time.
All right, man.
Well, they also murder people. I feel like that should be.
Yep.
That's important information.
Listen, public service announcement. If anyone calls you and asks you, it says they're a cop, and they ask you to do something suspicious, like buy a gift card, it's not a cop. Just be really suspicious. And also,
and they do it step by step. That's the key thing. They're not going to tell you everything at once because then it sounds, oh, this is obviously bullshit. They do one little incrementally. They get you to do one simple task, and then that's how they get you.
You know what?
You should wait.
You should-
Wait until you at least see them, so you know, like they've at least bought a cop costume and they deserve your money.
Here's what you do: if someone calls you and they tell you you're a cop, to verify you're a cop, you go, "Oh yeah, which gang are you in?
Right.
Huh?
That's true.
What's your tattoo look like?"
Yeah.
I'm with the patty wax.
In my defense, that's who would I'd be with. Yeah, that's probably who my grandpa was with. But in my defense, like he had a badge number, but then it occurred to me that wasn't a real number. You can just say anything and call it a badge number.
Yeah, it's 3.
He has long pauses before each of the numbers. I also liked when you asked for the guy's last name when he called you back on stream. He was like, "I'm Brian Miller."
Did you say Miller? I think he said Brian Williams. For
I
some-
wrote it down. What did I say? I think it was Miller. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brian.
If you know Brian Miller,
Yeah.
tell him to stop his hijinks. He's gone too far.
Oh goddamn. Okay.
I hate to do. Yeah. It was rough.
Oh, man. I mean, I did the accent a little bit. Listen, cancel me for it. I don't give a shit. The guy was evil.
He's a bad
I
man.
mean, maybe they need the money. I don't know.
No,
it's redistribution.
Don't do that.
How about that?
Don't think of it like that, man. We gotta
try to
track
you're a
these
victim,
people
Andrews.
down and John Wick them and get the gift cards back.
I gotta find some silver lining here. Yeah, get revenge. That's
Oh
it.
man.
Well, in the meantime,
let's move into our interview segment for this week. Very excited to talk to this writer. Wrote an upcoming piece that will be out on Knock LA about the gangs that we're talking about, the police gangs in the LASD, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, and how she's building a database that you can use to search dirty cops. Pretty cool, right? Let's go. Let's move into the segment. This is where if I wasn't worried about copyright infringement, my voice would slowly fade out, and we would slowly fade into breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law, breaking the law. All right, we are now joined by Cerise Castle, writer with Knock LA. Welcome to the show, Cerise.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here. Okay, so tell us about your upcoming piece about the LAPD.
Yeah, it's actually about the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
SD, sorry.
No worries. A lot of people actually aren't really familiar with the differences between the LAPD versus the LA County Sheriff. LAPD patrols within the city limits, and the Los Angeles County Sheriff is generally responsible for unincorporated Los Angeles County, so that's like East LA, South Los Angeles, out in the Antelope Valley. We've also got some sheriffs in West Hollywood, so some cities within the county that contract with them. In any case, they're pretty throughout the city and county of Los Angeles. You'll probably see a sheriff if you come out here. My piece is about deputy gangs that have been forming and that have essentially been dictating the culture of the department for the past 50 years, with the knowledge of, state, local, and federal government, and nothing has really been done about it.
Well, that's actually probably a pretty good distinction to start off on. I realized I was slipping that up as I was saying it, but it's interesting. So is this thing where, cops are, being exposed as being in these weird little cop gangs, is that specific to the sheriff's department? Do they exist in the LAPD? Do they exist in other police departments, to your knowledge?
Yeah, I think it's pretty unique to LA. I could be wrong, but I've heard about it a lot in Los Angeles. I think the biggest gang that we know about in LAPD was the police officers that participated in the Rampart Scandal back in the 90s. I believe that they had a gang tattoo of some kind of skeleton that they wore. But yeah, there has been a gang before in the LAPD, and because of that, there was a consent decree that was introduced, and as a result of that, that gang was rooted out and extinguished as far as we know. But
do you know what kind of skeleton it was?
Sorry?
Do you know the kind of skeleton?
Do I know the kind of skeleton?
Like a Jack Skellington, or like just the skull of a skeleton?
I can actually interject here. So I did a little bit of research on what we're talking about today, and what's interesting about this is that, without jumping ahead at all, we're going to be talking about these gangs within the LA Sheriff's Department, right? And there's this weird history of them. They all have these wild, 1950s greaser names. And something I noticed that I took notes about is that they all have fucking skeleton tattoos. And so I wrote down a list of a few of the gangs that we've identified. Here's a short list. The Hats, the Banditos, the Little Devils, the Regulators, the Grim Reapers, the Rattlesnakes, the Jump Out Boys, 2,000 and 3,000 Boys, and I think that's it until you start getting into
3,000 boys? That's too many boys.
The reason I wrote them all down and I wrote which skeleton tattoos they have according to because it's crazy. They all have the same like aesthetic going on. It's all very like rockabilly. So the Banditos have a skeleton with a pistol and a sombrero and a mustache. That lets you know what they're all about, right? The Jump Out Boys have a skeleton with a revolver. And I think it's the Jump Out Boys or the 3000 Boys that have so the Jump Out Boys have the skeleton with a gun, right? And if you're in the Jump Out Boys,
my greatest fear,
which is like, this is all, anyone that knows like fucking punk music, you're thinking of a Social Distortion tattoo right now, like the little guy with the fucking top hat and shit. But if you have a Jump Out Boys tattoo, the revolver has smoke lines coming out of it. You get a line added to your tattoo for everyone you shoot. So,
oh my god!
Yeah. So if you
imagine being murdered by this corny motherfucker. That sucks. You just become part of a skeleton tattoo.
Yeah. If you run across a cop who has like a really smoky gun on the tattoo, just run for your life because he's really trigger happy.
These are all human skeletons, right? To answer Alex's question, they're not like.
Well, I knew they were human skeletons. I didn't know if they were like silly.
I don't know how many types of skeletons there are other than by species.
Well,
they're frightening because they're inside you.
If you encounter a sheriff in Los Angeles, do not assume that they are very into Dia de los Muertos or something like that.
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, or they're a Hot Topic goth. This could be what's going on. Anyway, let's see. Oh, yeah, so I guess I was interested in this aspect because it seems like there's this overarching, like, concept here where there's a tendency to form gangs in this specific part of this specific city, which is weird because we have, like, similar expressions of that, like, cop camaraderie in, like, for example, in New York, the NYPD is notorious for the challenge coins, but not... I guess they don't have, like, we're the fucking, Lower East Side Bucket Boys or whatever. They don't have that thing.
We're the pizza rats. Nobody crosses us unless they want to get folded in half.
Anyways, so you're putting together a database, though. Is that what I have to understand?
Yeah, so along with a 12-part series that we're writing on all of the gangs that we've uncovered, I've uncovered about 18 different ones. We're building a database that will have the names, the people killed by these officers, like any like beatings or civil rights violations that they've been involved with, as well as their last assignment. So people can, look these people up and familiarize themselves with who exactly is on the streets in their neighborhoods with a gun and a badge and essentially a license to kill.
I wrote a question about this. A searchable database of police gang members that are violent. Isn't that called Bumble? Folks, all right. Okay, my real question, though, is do you think that something like this, like a searchable database of corrupt police officers, do you think this is something that actually will help make police officers more accountable, or is it just because I feel like we're kind of locked in this eternal battle with them where they go, they just figure out a different way around this to keep sort of covering their asses,
Yeah, and that's like the thing that I've been uncovering in my research is that, like I said, people in government and people in positions of power have known about this, like, since at least the mid-1970s, and this has been able to go on. And it's cost the county hundreds of millions of dollars in both settlements and attorneys' fees and related court costs. So, frankly, I'm not really optimistic that anything will change from a government perspective by publishing this, just frankly because they've had the opportunity for the past 50 years. And, I don't really see why my little story would make any difference. But I'm hoping that, the people that live in Los Angeles County can utilize this knowledge and, just like familiarize themselves with, like I said, who is exactly on their streets. And I hope that this will get people interested and engaging with the work that goes along with dismantling those systems that allow these officers to stay in place. I mean, like, there's a reason why, this hasn't been so widely discussed. It's incredibly difficult to just, first of all, get this information. Even though it is public record, it costs money to get that stuff, right? We've spent over $3,000 just, buying court cases so we can try to figure out, like, who these people are. It's also in those court cases and in the government reviews that are done when a police officer, kills somebody. A lot of times they're anonymized, or the information is presented in such a way that it's really hard to identify, like, oh, is that the same guy that did that 6 months ago? It's incredibly difficult. Like, I spent the past 6 months going through this stuff and, like, piecing it together. It's literally like, I feel like fucking Pepe Silva with, like, the red string on the wall.
Yeah.
Like, I literally have something like that in my house. So, I'm hoping that just simply by, like, making this available, it can change a lot, because that just simply hasn't been an option for at least 50 years.
Well, I know in L.A. Recently this guy Gascon was elected DA. I think possibly because people thought he was the character from Beauty and the Beast, but he's claiming
Ring the belt with your neck.
He released some 100-day report recently. It looked like he was doing some good stuff with, not letting officers with a history of misconduct testify, which is sounds like kind of a bare minimum thing. But is he doing anything on this? And if he wanted to, is there anything he even could do from the district attorney's office to crack down on these gangs?
Yeah, 100%. So, I think one thing that could be done, and one thing that a few attorneys that I've spoken with that have handled some of these wrongful death cases have told me, is that Gascon asked for any cases dating back, I believe it was until 2012, to be submitted to his office for review, and that he'll take a look at them and possibly consider filing charges on the officers. Granted, that's a pretty small window, especially when you're looking at police deaths in Los Angeles. I mean, just this week, the Los Angeles Police Department shot, I believe it was 5 people this week. And that's just 1 week. So dating back to 2012, that's really just a drop in the bucket as far as, like, shooting cases that we have here. But it is something. It's a start. It's given a hope to a lot of families that I've spoken to, hearing that there is a small chance that the officers that killed their loved one could face some sort of repercussion. Because, the truth is, when these officers, deputies, shoot somebody, they're, generally they don't really face any discipline, right? They're cleared by the district attorney. They're not charged. They don't face any discipline from their department, and oftentimes they're actually promoted and given awards and decorated, and this type of behavior is celebrated. Also, if a civil case is filed and some financial settlement is awarded to the family, that's not paid by the sheriff's department. It's not paid by the sheriff's department, nor is it paid by the deputies that are responsible for the death. It's paid by county taxpayers. That comes out of the county coffers. So there is no incentive for them to do better, because they're basically congratulated, patted on the back, and promoted.
Yeah. And is there sort of a union in the sheriff's department that is sort of supporting this? I know in places like Minneapolis, you have the head of the police union who's like a far right racist zealot. Is the police union in LA sort of responsible for kind of like keeping this stuff the way it is and not forcing back change?
Oh yeah, 100%. Both of our police departments have very strong unions with sort of a death grip on the contracts that they have with our city and county. That's the Los Angeles Police Protective Union for the LAPD, and the ALADS. I don't remember what it stands for, but that's for the Sheriff's Department, ALADS. And yeah, I mean, they've really got an iron grip on the powers that be as far as, you know, what they're allowed to do and where things stand.
Well,
Can I ask a very basic question?
good.
Which is just, is it actually illegal for the cops to be in a gang? Like, if they're not doing anything off duty, like if they shoot you on duty and then are in a gang, what rule does that break?
Yeah, so generally in California, presence in a gang, it's a violation of a specific part of our penal code. We have a part of our penal code that defines what a gang is. Basically, like, characteristics include, let's see, like a common tattoo, which a lot of these police gangs have, a common name or a symbol. They are engaged in criminal activity. So that's, you know, killing people. Extortion is another big one that we've seen in deputy gangs. What's another one that we see a lot? Probably like sexual harassment or rape.
Yeah.
So those are the characteristics of a gang, and that fits, you know, all of these groups that we've identified in our series. And so that's subject to some sort of, you know, either criminal enhancement, which Gascon has actually like stopped including as of now as part of his directive as district attorney. But generally, like, say if you were to be committed of like a murder and they found that you were in a gang as well, that would come with an enhancement of like, say, like 10 years or something because of your presence in a gang. But generally, this stuff is not looked at. When a deputy like kills somebody, the sheriff's department is actually responsible for carrying out that investigation on behalf of the DA. So you have sheriffs investigating their friends whether or not they should be charged. And those investigators never consider, you know, if somebody is in the regulators or the rattlesnakes.
Yeah, I guess what's really interesting to me is that a lot of this stems out of, I guess there's a actual specialized unit in the history of the LAPD called CRASH, which stands for Community Resources Against Street Hoodlums.
No way.
Yeah.
Was this after 2005, like based on the Paul Haggis movie?
Yeah, it's based on the movie Crash.
Yeah,
by fans
Andrews, it's
of the
based
movie
on the
Crash.
movie.
It sounds like something they would do.
No,
like,
tell me the fucking movie's based on this. This is a real thing that happened. But yeah, no, it's this real thing. And also, the Crash, if you were in Crash, you had a tattoo of a skull, a cowboy with a cowboy hat, and the dead man's hand in poker around it. Aces and eights for you guys that aren't poker heads.
Do you know the story of the dead man's hand?
No, please tell me.
Oh, okay. So the dead man's hand, that was what was in the hand of a Wild West police sheriff who was killed by a wayward hoodlum, and he had an ace and an 8 of spades in his hand, and that's since become the dead man's hand, and it's present in a ton of these deputy gangs tattoos.
My God. I always like that hand when I'm playing poker. I didn't know if it was a cop hand. It's bad luck. I'll have to disavow
Can't even
it.
get like a straight with it or anything.
Yeah. Well, you can get the nut flush, but that's not what we're here to talk about. So
That was for poker heads.
the thing about Crash that's really interesting to me, though, is that was a specialized unit that wasn't a private gang. And so there's this question hanging over this like whole thing. To me, really, the absurdity lies in this question of like, why are the police in a gang? Like, they're already in a gang. Why do you need a gang on top of a gang that also has a union on top of that? And most of all, how does a police officer, like, how do police fathom being themselves in a gang while in an anti-gang unit that is, theorizing of the street gangs that they're going after as somehow being only violently oriented, and their own gang is being about camaraderie and stuff, when the truth is that a gang in general kind of is both of those things? The reason I ask that is because, like, the coverage of, the Crips and the Bloods in the 90s, the Crips and the Bloods obviously did a lot of things that were, violent and criminal and stuff like that, but what's often downplayed, they're only defined by the violence and the crime, I guess, is what I'm getting at. And what's often downplayed is that these groups started off, honestly, as, like, mutual aid groups to some degree, and then things went in a certain direction for all sorts of sociological reasons. But, I mean, how are we having a situation where the police are literally doing the same thing and yet justifying this like witch hunt they're on, or this stated mission as anything but. I mean, there's like a cognitive dissonance there,
The gang is to protect them from cancel culture.
That's probably what they're fucking
They have
talking
to
about
stick
these days.
together.
There's that, and then also, I guess, to go back a little bit just into the history of this, if you want to look at like because I want to look at this from like a big picture point of view or something, can you tell us a little bit about the Rampart Scandal and all the stuff that happened in like the 90s that sort of predates, what we're talking about now?
Yeah. So the Rampart Scandal happened in the 90s in the like central Los Angeles area, and it involved, I believe, the big guy that was involved was a officer named Rafael Perez, and he came forward and named, I think, about probably, I want to say between like 50 and 70 people within his unit. They were all involved in some kind of crime, everything from, stealing drugs from people that they encountered on the streets and selling them to other people. Robbing banks was another thing that they got into a couple of times. Of course, perjury when they were in court, and covering up different stuff. The Rampart Scandal is supposedly behind the death of the notorious B.I.G., which is usually how people are familiar with them. That's probably my favorite story about the Crash Division.
That's
a little bit about them.
There's like one rogue cop who left and swears up and down he knows that it was them that killed Biggie, and he's just boxed out of everything.
Yeah,
It's really interesting to read about.
What's the story you were telling us about before with the off-duty cops?
Yeah, I guess my understanding of what happened in the 90s was that so Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records that ostensibly killed Biggie and Tupac and fucking everyone in the 90s, was hiring...
Killed everybody.
He was hiring...
Didn't kill Tupac.
Oh, sorry.
He didn't kill Kurt Cobain either.
I think it didn't kill Kurt Cobain.
or Left Eye.
No, we're not getting into this. Sorry, not Tupac, but he was. The point is, he was hiring like cops, like off-duty cops in L.A.,
Yes.
and they were working for him and getting paid tons of money on the side. And then it all sort of cracked open when one of the cops that he was, working, got into a road rage incident with another cop who was off duty. So they're both off duty. And then the Suge Knight cop starts waving his gun. And then the other undercover cop was like, a guy's waving a gun at me. I'm a cop. So he killed that guy. And then oh my God, we're both cops. And it just unraveled this whole thing. And I guess The Shield is based on this, that TV show.
Yes.
Oops, all cops.
Yeah.
Due to a mix-up at the Justice Lab.
So these gangs, they go back all the way to, I guess, like the 70s on paper, at least, in terms of what we've been able to unearth about them. Like the Banditos are one of the oldest ones. And then you obviously have this situation where, you have the Rampart Scandal and these guys that are working with like Suge Knight and Death Row Records and stuff like that. I guess to me this raises a question: is there like a racist element in this? Because I know the Vikings have been accused by a judge of being a neo-Nazi white supremacist organization.
Yeah, Terry Hatter wrote in his decision that they were a neo-Nazi gang, and I mean, like in my research, like they had a map of Africa, or they had rather a map of Linwood, which was their neighborhood, in the shape of Africa hanging on the wall. They had a ticket to Africa pinned to a bulletin board. I mean, their symbol is a Viking, which is, known for raping and pillaging across Europe. There's definitely a racial element to these gangs, and that goes along, that I've seen in my research, that sort of also plays into who is promoted, you know, like if you're white and you've got the co-signing of like a Viking, because, you know, as these guys get older, they move up and now they're dictating policy in the department. So if you're a young white guy who's got a co-sign from an older Viking, you're probably going to move up. And that just, you know, further perpetuates racism and all sorts of bad treatment that police officers and sheriff's deputies do to the people that they patrol.
God.
How did they deal with, like, the fact that the police department in general has people of all races in it? Like, are there, like, rival ethnic gangs in the police department that are all pitted against each other?
It's not like the Sharks and the Jets or anything. It's... So an interesting thing to me is that... and this goes into like a deeper discussion of, you know, how people of color can themselves play into white supremacy. You know, we've seen black deputies joining like the Vikings, for example. We've seen Latinx joining the Vikings. You've seen them joining gangs like the Executioners, where the tattoo is a skeleton wearing a Nazi helmet. It goes back to that.
No subtlety.
We were talking about earlier, that us versus them, you know, they don't really, to me, I think it goes beyond race. They see themselves as blue lives, right? They're not a black man. They're not a Latino man. They're not a white woman. They're a police officer. They're blue. And the rest of us are the enemy. And they will do whatever it takes to protect their blue brothers ahead of the community, which is, you know, completely the opposite of what their stated intention is, right? But unfortunately, that's what it's become.
That's what I think is so interesting about the evolution of the police, even because, like, you know, if you go back in history, there is, to me, it appears, I guess, at least, the older stories about police corruption kind of involve the police, you know, being directly ideologically, like, opposed to leftists or black and brown neighborhoods and stuff like that. I read a piece that was sent to me during all this about, like, Ruben Salazar, the Chicano journalist who was, you know, had very far left politics and was, you know, we'll never know, but he was potentially assassinated by the LAPD or the SD, can't remember which one. I guess SD because it was East LA. Mm-hmm. You know, and so when you look at those old stories, it's easier to see the origins of the police as an institution as something that is, you know, like directly, straightforwardly racist and along these certain lines. But it almost seems that it evolved to an extent to where it was able to keep, like, functioning by including people of color. And now you have a situation where it's literally just the purpose of the police isn't even to serve, like, a huge interest like that anymore. It's just to serve the police. It's like a thing that's completely, like, self-driven or whatever. And I guess, like, to me, when I think about all this, and I think about, like, the journalists that, you know, we were able to see during the George Floyd uprisings last summer, like, a lot of them had, you know, footage on them, and, you know, we're able to get a much clearer picture of police covering their own asses for, you know, for engaging in this kind of just non-ideological nonsense. I guess to me, the meta thing happening in my mind when I think about this is that, like, well, we can't maybe get them. Like, we're not going to find a lot of justice in going after individual isolated problems. But does this help the overall explanation to society about the point of this institution? It seems like the largest battle here is explaining to the entire country this institution has a purpose and it's not what you think it is. And I guess the cell phone footage and stuff like that, to me, kind of makes it a little bit easier to explain that, but, like, also it's, you know, the defund the police thing is, like, such a huge endeavor. I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm asking is, you know, if we're talking about making a database here and doing the work of, like, exposing police officers, How does that fit in? I mean, do you think this is going to help the defund the police movement? Do you think that's a thing that's still on the table at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I hope that this project really opens people's eyes to, how uh, how the how the sheriff's department has been able to manipulate the system to be able to, really hijack millions of taxpayer dollars to, essentially violate people's civil rights and kill them. I don't think people really are aware of exactly how that process works. So I'm hoping that, people that aren't exactly tuned in to police corruption will read this and see that, this is deep, right? This goes back to the county. This goes to how our government is set up. I really think that in order to have those conversations about, looking at defunding the police and even abolishing the police, we have to look at, okay, how does it work, and how are these systems set up, and what keeps this stuff in play. And I think by looking at that, we'll have other answers as to how we can rebuild the system into something that is more reflective of what we want and serves more people in a better way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of the political efficacy of this information for the defund movement, right? I think it is very helpful because the battling narrative you have for the whole thing is we have all this footage of police cracking heads and doing all this stuff that they're not supposed to be doing on one side, and then you have the people who are defending the police saying if we get rid of the police, it's going to be crime in the streets. It's going to be like the Purge. And so you need the prevailing thing that is going to actually change hearts and minds on this is to kind of come at it, I feel like, from the liberal perspective, which is just be like, oh, I see your institution and it doesn't work. We have all of this footage that the people we're paying to stop the crimes are actually doing crimes.
Right.
And even if it's almost besides the point, it is still a huge dent in terms of the counter argument that you're going to get thrown at you by the Blue Lives people.
Yeah. In terms of I feel like in the same way that, the super predators and gangbangers and all these sort of fear mongering ideas were percolated in the 80s and the 90s, or spread in the 80s and 90s. We could do the same, hopefully, with these gangs, to be really cynical about it, have a scare-casted campaign about these gangs going out there killing people, because that's what they're doing. They're way more dangerous than whatever, remnants of the Bloods and the Crips exist out there.
We could make a DARE program for police officers.
Yeah.
Give them a soccer ball.
We have to come up with police to police the police and come and talk to them about drugs and stuff.
They love that, and it's safe to do.
I also want to say, if anyone out there is considering rising through the ranks of the LAPD and becoming a Viking, I invite you to spend a day with a Scandinavian American. We are not competent people. We are not particularly intelligent or brave or anything. It's all romanticization.
I guess you have to join a police gang, at least make it a skeleton-themed gang.
Please, that's the one rule that we abide by, is that you have to have a rockabilly skeleton of some kind. Various,
Don't tarnish the Vikings' good name.
The accessories are up to you. That's where you get personal with this. And put your own flair on it.
You want to join the Bonemen, huh?
Yeah. When I was reading about this, I started to feel a little bad because our old logo is a skull, and I was like, "Oh no! Are we cops? What happened?" But we switched to rats. So
These hands.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm not skeptical, but I'm worried about the tactic, though, because it seems like where we're at with, and especially the way liberals kind of work in general, is that we figured out that there's, we exposed this huge problem. We have media on our side. It seems like the defining factor and what really turned a lot of people around on police in the last 10 years is smartphones. You could just see stuff that you couldn't see before, and so something like a database is obviously going to play into that and work in that way. But it does seem like you still get stonewalled with people sometimes that are like, wow, that's such a terrible, I can't believe these cops are doing this. that means we got to elect a better sheriff next time around or whatever. And like, you can't really look at the whole thing institutionally as like a problem with the thing. It's just like, oh, it's, it's corrupt or whatever. The narrative about corruption always kind of gets slippery for me. And I always worry that it's easy to turn them around. If you're the fucking police, you can go, oh, wow, yeah, that last guy, he was the problem, and not us as a thing or whatever. But I don't know. I guess that's why we just keep trying to change people's minds about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I really hope that like framing it in talking a lot about the money really taps in with people, because
Totally.
I mean everyone cares about money, right? You can be red, blue, like whatever. Everyone gives a crap about how much money is going to police and like what it's being spent on, right? I think anyone that looks and says that, wow, like I as a taxpayer have spent at least $100 million on wrongful death lawsuits, like that's bad. That's bad no matter how you slice it.
Yeah,
You're
totally.
really pushing the limits of absurdity with police budgets, because I don't see how you could like spell out for your average person more than you're wasting your money than giving every police officer a Tesla and a robot dog, and yet that is very common now. So like, what does it take?
Yeah.
LA like a bike cop city? Because like there are a lot of cities that like, especially in the Midwest, where it's like kind of a liberal city, and they have the bike cop, which is like, they try to be friendly with it. They have sometimes they have Facebook pages. They're like, I'm a cop on a bike, but the bike is like decked out with a bunch of like secret weaponry underneath it. They can like shoot a concussion grenade out of the spoke or something like that. Is the LAPD like trying to do this sort of kindler, gentler like public relations campaign, or they're just
Kind of. So the LAPD has recently started, or recently expanded rather, this thing called the Community Safety Partnership, which was something that they introduced in public housing projects as a result of LAPD actually killing 5 members of the Zuniga family. So their response to the LAPD killing the Zuniga family was expanding their program in the projects, of course. And as a result of the Defund the Police movement, our mayor has recommended expanding this program across the city. So that would include parks. So while we do not have bike cops now, I think that's something that we'll see. As far as the sheriff's department is concerned, my personal experience with that, if you go further out into the county, is no. They are pretty, they're like gangbangers, in my experience. They drive around in their cars. They flash their lights at you. They don't really engage with you in a friendly level. In West Hollywood, that's a little different, I think, because that's like a whiter, more male, gay city. I see them walking around, and sometimes they will try to talk with you, but
The Echo Park cop is on one of those electric unicycles or something, just being an Apple Store guy. Yeah.
A cop who balances a beach ball on their head.
Oh God, that guy's everywhere. That's a New York
Do they
reference.
like know about you personally? Like, are you concerned like for your safety at all? Like the the deeper into this you get?
yeah, 100% yes. Yeah, it's definitely a conversation that I've had with my editors and with my girlfriend. Yeah, 100%. A buddy of mine recently, Lexus Olivia Ray, he was covering celebrations when the Dodgers won the World Series. And although there were hundreds of people in the street that night after the COVID curfew, he was the only person that the city's attorney's office is charging with a crime for being out past curfew. And he was a journalist covering the events. So I've also heard of Scott Budnick, the producer for The Hangover. He has been very outspoken against the Los Angeles County Sheriff, and he's currently the subject of a criminal investigation as a result of him being critical. So yeah, these are conversations that I have all the time with my friends, my girlfriend, with my editor. It's something that I consider, and I try to take precautions to keep myself safe, and hopefully not be charged with some sort of bullshit fraudulent charge. I have an attorney on speed dial, so I'm doing what I can to be protected.
Yeah.
You ever hang out with the hangover guy?
I want to. I hope he listens to this and gives me a call. I also want to get in touch with Vanessa Bryant. She's done some great work over the past couple of days as far as talking about the callousness of the sheriff's department, who shared photos of her dead husband and daughter.
God damn. Wow.
This is a very popular show with Hollywood bigwigs.
Yeah, no, they love
Jake. They want to hear what he has to think.
Yeah.
I hope this works for you.
Oh, man. I mean, that is good, though, that, people at that level in Hollywood are involved in this. That means that the ideological battle lines are being pushed a little bit, and it's not like a fringe issue as much as it was a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised. This is sort of a separate issue, but at the amount of support there was for like Nithya Raman, and it sounds like public banking and other stuff from like, celebrities. Like that's not the base, or that shouldn't be the base, but seems like there are at least a good amount in LA who are socially conscious.
I hope so. I mean, we've reached out to a couple of people like with this project. I'm hoping that, I love when celebrities like push this kind of stuff just because of like the reach that they have, and just like, turning like normies into like something like, oh, deputies in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Like even Vanessa just like posting the names of the deputies who were sharing those photos of Kobe. Like that's huge. Like waking people up to the issues of the corruption. Like I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to pause. All right, Anders, tell that story we just told off mic.
I just get it's crazy how taxpayers are funding this because the NYPD has a fund that paid for my old bed from West Elm for when cops beat people up. They just have money set aside in the budget, but LA doesn't have that. That's crazy. But I mean, either way, it feels like they still don't. It's just like an inevitability that they're going to have to settle for either killing or, otherwise terrorizing the citizens of the city that they police. Do you think that would make a difference if it was in the police budget, the money that they have to fork over for settlements?
Yeah, so I've actually been reading up on this, and gosh, I'm trying to find her name. I believe she's a professor at UCLA. Her name is Joanna Schwartz, and she's written extensively on this. And she's looked at, is it better to sort of budget in these cases like they do in New York, or to have it taken from like a general fund like we do in LA? And basically what she's found in her research is that, taking it out of the police department or having like a budget for settlements of that sort really doesn't make a difference in curbing police violence, because it basically budgets in civil rights violations as part of the cost of doing business as a police department. Which I think is really unfortunate. I really think that, really to make a difference, you would have to either make the sheriff's department pay for it from their budget or have them be personally liable. But unfortunately, that's not an option here in California because of how our law is set up. Government employees cannot be personally liable for what they do while they're doing their work. So unfortunately, it will always be taxpayers picking up that bill.
Wow.
That's a great union they have going on.
Yeah, the government.
They get all of their rights are protected. I think if we have such a hard time abolishing the police, we could maybe go the other way with it and just make it so everyone is technically a cop, and then maybe we'll just have all of our bases covered.
Yeah.
That's where we're headed, yeah.
Copocracy. I like it.
It's not where we want to go, but it might not be too bad.
All right. Well, I think this has been a pretty good conversation, and I look forward to reading your piece and learning more about the seedy underbelly world of cop gangs.
The rib bone of the skeleton.
Yeah. I'm so fascinated with this now before we get out of here. I guess one thing I would like to ask you is just because we are talking about this and it is illuminating and like it really does paint a picture of like, I guess how, I don't know any other word to use, but like stupid this all is. The fact that there are like these fucking like little like teenage greaser gangs within the police department, because like when you read about it, you read that they like get in trouble for like punching each other out at like house parties when they're off duty and stuff. I think one of the, I can't remember which one it was, Banditos or Vikings, like punched a female officer in the face over like just an argument they were having. So it's in the spirit of, you know, just exposure or whatever and kind of getting people thinking about all this stuff. What are the worst things you've heard about these cops, you know, doing with their little street gangs?
Cop on cop or cop on civilian? What?
Cop on civilian. Cop on cop is funny. Cop on civilian is something people need to know about, I guess.
Let's see. Most awful cop on cop. There is a man named Karin Mendoyan who was rehired by our current sheriff, Alex Villanueva. Karin Mendoyan was fired for domestic violence against his girlfriend, who was another sheriff's deputy. She actually got him on film attempting to break into her house, throwing stuff at her. He like strangled her and tore her jeans. That's probably the worst cop on cop.
God damn.
That
Okay.
I've heard about. Cop on civilian. God, I mean, they killed 19 people.
Yeah, fair.
That's
Right.
pretty bad.
Worse than death, is that the question?
Probably the most atrocious death that I'm familiar with is God, there are so many. There are so many. One that I'm writing about right now is the death of Brian Pickett, who was tasered to death in his mother's bathroom and left to die in front of his mother and sister on the living room floor. He basically like went into cardiac arrest and no medical attention was rendered. And he died in front of his family. It was really horrible. There's also Johnny Martinez, who was shot 34 times as his mother, father, neighbor, and neighbor's 13-year-old son watched. This was a schizophrenic man who was having a mental health episode.
Well, goddamn. 34 times. That's really fucking terrible. All right. Well, I didn't mean to end on a down note, so...
How else did you think that question was going to end?
I don't know. I was thinking about the gangs. The gangs were making me laugh because they're with the tattoos and stuff, and then I remembered the reality of this is that it's a skull
The
because
question
it's a
should
dead
have
person.
been, what's your favorite anecdote from a five-finger Death Punch concert?
Let's see. What's a positive?
There's nothing positive
There's a
about
movement,
cops.
right? There's like a movement in LA that wants to defund the sheriff's department, and they're active, right?
Yeah, definitely. The ACLU is doing a lot of work around this stuff. They've recently started a new coalition called Check the Sherrif, which is doing a bunch of work around eliminating people to this stuff, as well as giving people the tools to advocate and usher in the changes that they want to see in the sheriff's department. So, if people are interested in tapping in with that sort of work, I definitely recommend, reaching out to the ACLU and the Check the Sherrif coalition specifically.
Okay, that is a great note to end on, I think. Cerise Castle, thank you so much for joining us. Please let my listeners know where they can read your stuff and where they can find your upcoming piece and all that stuff.
Yes, you can find me on social media. I am at Cerise Castle, and you can read this series on Knock LA. If you are so able, we would love if you could donate to our Patreon. Like I mentioned earlier, although these are public records, it costs money, and it costs a lot of money. And I'd love to keep doing this work, and donations make it possible. So if you're able, thank you.
Sweet.
All right. And yeah, if you are a listener to our show and you want to support our show, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/PodDaveAmerica. We also have merch for sale. And my other podcast is Why You Mad. Does anyone have anything else to plug?
If you like non-police unions, phone bank for the PRO Act this week is like a week of action to get the PRO Act passed. Go on dsausa.org to find out more info on that. I'm at Andersley here on Twitter. And movie suggestion, just watched Red, White, and Blue which is part of. No, it's good. It's
Okay.
related to this because it's
Okay.
part of Steve McQueen's new series of not short movies, full length, almost movies he did. That's on Amazon. This one's with John Boyega, and it's about British police community relations in the '60s, and it's it's sort of amazing in the ways that things are different, but also the same over there with that issue as well. So check that out.
That's still a very interesting move for a plug, but sure, good point.
Yeah, plugging good art.
It's going to be part of our show now. You can find me on Twitter at Patak Jokes. I put all of my projects on there. That's PTAK Jokes. And my movie suggestion this week is Pulp Fiction. If you haven't seen it, it has a lot of great action sequences and a sword. Bruce Willis gets a sword.
There are no cops in that movie. I'm just realizing. Right?
I think No, there has to. I'm going to watch it again to see if there are cops, and you should as well. That's the movie pick of the week.
They do everything without cops. It's amazing.
It's amazing. What a country. But yeah.
Okay, well, my movie pick of the week is Adaptation. I just rewatched it. It's a great Charlie Kaufman film.
Cerise, do you have any film recommendations?
Hell yeah. I've got a film recommendation. Watch Den of Thieves. It's all about the Regulators, one of the LA sheriff's gangs.
Ooh,
really?
Cool. Okay, I'm glad we did this, actually.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that tonight.
Yeah, that sounds fucking cool. All right, well, Thanks, everyone. It's the end of the podcast. It's finished.
It's finished.
Outro music this week is a song called Stimmy by Fellatia G featuring a bunch of fucking people. It has nothing to do with cops. This is about the stimulus, which we didn't talk about, but I think it's a great song. It just came out, and you should support Fellatia G and all these motherfuckers. So look up the information in the show notes, go download it on Bandcamp and all that shit. It'll get stuck in your head. Trust me. I'm doing this to fuck up your brain. Give me the stimmy. Give me the stimmy.
Hey, yo, move, make it bounce.
Give me the stimulus check. Hey, I need my stimulus quick. I don't have health insurance. My government really ain't shit.
Give me the stimulus check.
Hey,
I need my stimulus quick. I don't health insurance. My government really ain't shit.
give me the spinny. 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 Give me money. Give me time. I am running out of breath. Shit ain't funny. I'm a mess. I'm running out of mess. This shit is sickening, crippling. Really, I must be tripping. They give me pennies, crumbs, countries run by a bunch of dumb cunts. Bitches, they ain't even doing the minimum. They ain't even reading the syllabus. My syllables slithering like I'm Elizabeth. Fuck the link in which the left is. Fuck the IRS. I'm so depressed and stressed. They sent my check to the wrong address. Getting desperate to make the rent. I spent that shit like it came and went. Can't make a dent, paying my debt. Incompetent, botch response like when I withdraw from Adderall. I didn't had it all, then lost it. That's why I'm radically exhausted. Feels like I'm practically a hostage. I live in a failed state. It's a damn shame. It's a sham scam. It's a damn scheme. The American dream is dead. Hey, off with their heads. Give me the stimulus check. Hey,
I need my stimulus quick.
I don't have health insurance.
My government really ain't shit.
Give me the spinny. 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 Give me the spinny.
Cause on her zaddy, keep that blicky when I'm traveling. Fuck all night like we off addicts. Kill a cop at a rally. I went from a magic carp to Gyarados. I was really in that field like a scarecrow. I'm a vampire, baby, I'm a communist. Suck my dick, swallow it, all of it. Fuck politicians, cause shit conditions and carbon emissions. They switch positions like my bitches. I'm on a mission in a pandemic. This is never ending. Government tryna hold me back, but I still flexing and I paid all my dues. But them pussies still begging. $250,000 wire transfer and it's still
Give me the stimulus check. Hey,
I need my stimulus quick.
I don't have health insurance. My
government really ain't shit.
Give me the spinny. Give me the spinny. Give me the spinny. Give me the spinny.